Hello, I'm Norm Zocher, and this is Coffee Talk.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department at Berklee College of Music, and we're here for another coffee talk. We've got with us, as usual, Cheryl Bailey, assistant chair. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey everybody, coffee cheers.
We've got Ian Steed, our senior coordinator, as usual. Hey, Ian.
Hey all.
And our guest today is Professor Norm Zocher. Hey, Norm.
Hello, and today I'm having a lovely organic Earl Grey from Trader Joe's. However,
Ooh.
if it was, I already had my coffee. I don't want to do too much coffee because it's it's 2 o'clock. So it's not it's not one of those long Berklee days. Otherwise, I'd be drinking coffee all day. But so now I'm taking it down a notch.
Oh,
But
no kidding. Okay.
But my recommendation is Trader Joe's Irish breakfast tea. That is my number one.
That's your number
I'm
one.
familiar,
That's my
very
number
familiar
one.
with that, Norm. It's very good.
And okay, I should back up. It's actually King Cole Orange Pico from New Brunswick, Canada. But the closest thing I can get to it is Trader Joe's Irish breakfast tea.
That's great. So now what I remember is when we're at school, you often make like several cups of coffee, and you have this way, I don't even know how you do it. It's almost like an acrobat. You're able to kind of push them all together with two hands and carry them somehow from the coffee maker to your teaching studio. Did you have to study physics to pull that off? Like, how did you do that?
Do you know my son and I are doing AP Physics, so.
Okay, so I
you wouldn't
figured.
believe that. And I've had a thing with a tree falling, the whole thing. I'm seeing the world in terms of force applied and potential and potential.
I always thought that was
versus
amazing.
kinetic.
Because it implied that you knew that you would be so into teaching that you wouldn't actually have time to leave your teaching studio and walk down the hall of the office. So it's like as though you had a cup of coffee for each lesson lined up on the desk, like ready for each student.
I don't have time. I don't. Honestly.
Yeah, I see. That's great. So when you're in lessons with Professor Norm Socher, you're in there, man. He's not getting up and walking around.
No. There's no time.
I love that. So Norm, you've been at Berklee for a long time, and
we shall not mention.
No, we're not going to mention how long. But a lot of the people who are listening have either been involved with Berklee for a long time, or they're just coming. They're students, or they're prospective students, or they're entering, and everyone's really interested in first day experiences. And I'm wondering if you have some memories of your first days, and it could be any type of first day, like first day of teaching on the faculty, first day of, coming and visiting. Like, what are some first day impressions that you have?
First day at Berklee? It was too long ago. I can't remember it. I can't remember it. I know. But I remember the first year, and I remember Sean. And here, should I do this? Here, should I take a chance? Here we go. So Sean is I'm like 3-note to a string. 3-note to a string patterns are too hard for harmonic minor. And then Sean came in and went, neck pickup. I need bridge pickup. Anyhow, and after that, I wish I could remember Sean's last name, but I can't.
He was a student. Sean was
a student, and
wow.
And you know what I said? If Sean can do it, I better do it. So it's like that was a great first year experience. It was like, because there's that augmented second. If you're trying to do the harmonic minor 3 notes to a string, and it's hard, but Sean could do it, and I was like, you know what? Thanks, and I can thank Sean for that. It was
So right in the beginning, you were learning things from the students that came to you right away.
Oh, and that's why I wanted to share my documents today, because if you would see my documents, it's everything is like, it's like bebop scales Liam, right? Donnelly Andre, right? It's like, and then all my scales. So if I have like, because you've been getting into neck diagrams, right? So I've got, so I have, for major scale, there's like 30 people's names. There's like, major scales Bob, major scales, there, anyhow, there's like, and so what was that?
Yeah, can you explain that? They all have names, or those people that influenced you for those fingerings, or
in other words,
Sam and
well, in other words, it's like the people who have like the kind of in Nashville, the Nashville Cats are coming out of major scale with root fourth finger, it's out of like the G chord shape, right? I'm an E chord, because of minor pentatonic, right? I'm like an E chord. My roots are E chord shape, in terms of my harmonic orientation. I would say, So for my primary fingering, so there's one person at anything that's major, the root. Well, actually, a bunch of people like will have anything that's major. A major mode with the root on the E string, they're going to have it with their fourth finger. Then so in a caged world, right, coming out of the G shape, right, And by the way, when I was saying the E shape, that's coming out of that cage thing, right? So and then a lot of people have come out of the Leavitt fingerings, right, and those are very distinct. Yeah, whatever the standard Berklee fingerings, like I used to teach when I first came, right? That's one of my big memories. I'll tell you. Anyhow, I just really sad I didn't get to meet William Leavitt. Basically, I was talking about it today with somebody. But that's one of my sad memories, and it's funny, is I didn't realize. That I like him so much. I didn't know him. I came from a different school, and it's like we were just doing Autumn Leaves today, or no, All the Things You Are. His All the Things You Are version, and I was doing it with a student, and anyhow, it's just I really have bonded, like, I think, with his materials and stuff like that. Even though I don't, and I'm a Leavitt rebel. Like, I do not, I change position. I'm one of those evil position changers. Like, when it comes to doing scales, Bill was about eyes on the page, hands on the fingerboard, so you could read. It's like my son's doing piano lessons now. That's the deal, Eyes on the page, and you get and you feel that stuff.
It's so interesting that you say this, because there's a lot of parallels that I'm feeling from studying classical music, in that all of our repertoire and all of our technique it comes through this lineage of teachers and composers. And it's really beautiful that you've made these handouts and you think of the materials and the lineage of teachers and students that have influenced you, and players who are in different parts of our field, so that you do have a sense like, oh, in Nashville you're more apt to do it this way, and in this style you're more apt to do it this way. There are metal people who play the harmonic minor this way, and all of that reminded me of this conversation I had with Larry Bayonne really recently about Bill Leavitt. And he said, you learn fingerings and you learn positions, so that eventually the whole guitar becomes one big pattern. And then you approach it the way you need to approach it for what you do. You're not meant to stay confined. These are a pathway for you, so that the whole thing becomes one big position, and then you see how it connects. And I think that's really beautiful that you have this like living family tree.
Yeah.
That's really cool, Norm. I really like that.
Yeah,
that's great.
It was what happened. I got hired the semester Bill died. Right, it was like, and he was too sick, and then and then there's this crazy thing with the lap steel with him. Right, it's like anyhow, but we'll pass
Well,
on that. The one thing. Oh, what was that?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was saying about the Uber position. Like, if you're trying to get the Uber position, again, the Holy Grail, right? The Holy Grail of guitar is that you see is what you're talking about, right? That the guitar is one big super position, right? That you're moving at will through. So my advice would be about, again, going back to Sean, which is do 3 notes to a string patterns, right? That to me is like you get, for any scale, which were, really only 4 scales and 7 modes of each, right? The ones we do, semesters 1, 2, 3, 4, unless we include diminished scale in that thing, but which is not much anyway. But it's like those 3 note to a string patterns. There's just 7 of them for each, for one for each mode, right? And that, I think, if anybody's looking for that, I tend to, I think that's kind of the easiest way to do it. It's certainly, I don't know how you all feel about 3 note to string patterns, but they simplify the mechanics of the instrument, right? In terms of right hand, left hand.
If you look at Cheryl and I's faces, we're feeling pretty good that you're saying that, because we just completed with Larry Bayonne our review that we started. I don't know if you remember this, but way back in 2018, when Larry was still chair, and before I came on as chair, we had done that review of all the proficiencies, and we decided to introduce the 3 notes per string patterns. 7 of them for each type of scales, for 7 patterns, 7 modes, and we will have by the NAMM show in January this beautiful book from Berklee Press that is going to be out there with an introduction to all the stuff that we give people as an intro to proficiency. So that's great. Yeah, I think that is true. I think it makes it a little clearer when you have 7 modes, you got 7 fingerings, and then you have to come to the understanding that you can use them in different ways, and you can start to connect them and move through them. So that's great.
But it's a mechanical thing that specifically that you have you have 2, 1 and 4, and then it's either 2 or 3.
Exactly.
And then you're and it's the right hand thing too. So what regardless of if you're doing alternate picking, finger picking, economy picking, legato, no matter what you do, it's repeating every time. If you're taking a scale pattern, it's repeating symmetrically across the string set. So it's just, again, it's like, I think I'm probably thinking of some of this because my son's been doing beginning piano, and it's been, actually I've been really, thinking, it's so worked out with piano. It's not like the guitar, which is constantly, evolving into God knows what,
Right.
And the pedal steel back here. Sorry.
Yeah, and that I was going to ask you, because you said pedal steel in passing, and I think it's really interesting that you've played different styles of guitar, and then you've also really gotten into pedal steel. And yeah, I'm wondering, like, with all of the different things that you do you tend to see the connections between them, or are you drawn to them primarily because of the differences?
I've been thinking about this, and it's back to the students, and I think we all know this. You see, when we see all you come in here, and you're like 18, and then it's like in a year, it's like you see the level, like people's levels, like it's unbelievable how fast our students grow, right? And how awesome they come in awesome, and then you just see that it's like. So it's one of these things that also goes back to me teaching my son AP physics and algebra too, which is kicking me. It's like, from doing this, and my students and my son, it's like how brilliant the students you guys are, right? I just cannot. How smart and how it's just unbelievable your brains are at that age at acquiring information. It's actually stunning. And so one of the things I'm like, well, if they can go and, I see these people like, I give them the Jerry Bergonzi book 1, and then they go away for the summer and come back and they're like shredding changes. And I'm like, oh my God, so I'm playing guitar for a long time, so how about I learn something new everyone, it's like, if they can do it, but it might take me longer, but I'm going to do it too. So I must say it's kind of like my wife, Abby, in the guitar department. She's a serial crafter, so she'll do scrapbooking, she'll do jewelry, she'll get into art, airbrush, whatever. She's so I'm sort of a serial, I think I'm a serial guitar. I try to, you know what I mean? If you play long enough, why not try, if there's enough time, spend a couple of years on it. My new thing is I'm trying to trying to get this bebop. Oops, there we go. Trying to get this. It's like a morph. So, more, I've spent enough time on the pedal steel that it actually made my bottleneck better. And then I'm like, you know what, from the pedal steel, I tend to play with a lot of times because, I was new to it. I was moving the bar around. I'm trying to use my brain to sound good as opposed to lack of physical ability. So I play a lot of times with the bar flat. And a funny thing, I was like, wow, you know what? If I mix up sometimes you don't move on pedal steel, you play across the strings, and because the intervals there's a lot of seconds and thirds basically in there, so you can get melodies just going across it, and then so then I'm like, you know what? It's like actually I could put this is also a Richie Hartism, which is that Wes Montgomery only plays with these three fingers. Right. So if he plays with that, I can put a slide on this, and that's what Tronzo, is, and the grandpappy of this stuff is Tronzo, and he's a fourth finger slide player, right. and it's so they freeze these up, so you've got a Wes Montgomery here with a slide,
So I just want to say that in the little example, for the people who aren't watching, for the people who are listening instead. Norm put a slide on his fourth finger and was playing that bebop line with his slide. And then he referenced Richie Hart, who's a professor who plays Wes Montgomery style with three fingers, fingers 1, 2, and 3 on the left hand, and doesn't use the fourth finger. And then combine that idea with David Tronzo, who is our slide guitar professor, who always plays slide on his fourth finger so that he can fret behind the slide.
Yeah. So
and then, you actually get the notes that you fret behind the slide if you can hold the slide properly, which is so hard to do.
It's like that.
Hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, and you get that pedal, and it's like, that's what you do,
It's a little bit pedal steel-like, yeah. But if you're going to try that at home, I just want to say to everyone who's watching or listening, please take the advice that I'm sure Norm will second from Professor Tronzo, which is only do it for like 2 minutes at a time if you're not used to putting the slide on your little finger, because the little finger, I'm holding up my hand and I'm showing you that the little finger is connected to this tendon that's really important on the side of your arm, and if you do too much slide too soon, you can really inflame that area. And so go slow, everyone who's going to be inspired.
It took what's funny with it is it's taken me forever, my whole life to actually, I think he must build up this muscle so you don't plot, you hear this clank when you hit the fretboard. I still do that.
I mean, I've experimented, even before I came to Berklee, I was playing slide on nylon strings.
It sounds great.
Thank you. I love it. It's, especially like a glass slide. And you do have to be really careful, or you bang around a lot. You click the frets,
Yeah. When it clunks onto the fretboard,
it's not a good sound, and then it goes, and then you can't have that. But so, Norm, what are some of the things you think you've learned as a performer, as a teacher, from constantly learning new things? Like, are there kind of bigger concepts that you feel like have made you a better musician from just putting yourself in a beginner role?
Well, in the beginner role, or
being kind of a beginner with something new, like I'm gonna go.
Right.
or I'm gonna,
Yeah, it's You know what I keep thinking about along these lines, right, of this thing is that it's that 10, you remember when they had that 10,000 hours of mastery guy come in, and the thing that stuck with me, well, I'll just say this: you please remind me this anytime you see me in the hall, because my instinct, when I started guitar, I wanted to be the fastest guitar player. That's all I wanted to do was be fast, and and then what the guy that 10,000, that what's the common theme, like with all of these great teachers, whether it's a singer, whether it's a pianist, whether it's tennis teachers in Russia, it's everything. They do everything ridiculously slow, right? And it's, so I'm like, so that's one of the things, and from that, what I realize, and I'm sure you do, Kim, like with it's like the Bach pieces, right? The Bach suites, right? When you play those, it's like I tell people when they complain about like learning all the inversions of the drop twos for levels 5 through 8. It's like, yeah, this is like what it is to play a Bach suite, because every moment of it is like a brand new chord, right? And it's page after page, a brand new chord. Your hands are doing things they've never done before. And the funny thing is, like, compare that with Villa-Lobos. Villa-Lobos is like, boom, everything's like a gift to a guitar player, right? It's all it's like, it's so physically easy, right? What you do, and your grandma is like so happy with you. It's like, and then you play the Bach suites. It's like, and I'm struggling, right? It's like, anyhow.
I mean, yeah, Villa-Lobos was such a guitaristic composer, right?
Yeah, I mean,
he was a guitarist. Yeah.
There is a thing to think about. It is like, it's an interesting thing, and I think like Cheryl probably could chime in about this with jazz. Is that jazz, is in flat keys and stuff, and it doesn't really, if you think it's the open strings that's where you get this the biggest bang, like, oh, whoa, it's in standard tuning. It was supposed to be an open D. Sorry. Did she do it? No. Okay. This is life with Abby. Is every time you pick up a guitar, it's in a new tuning. So you never know what's gonna happen.
That's great.
But the main thing is that when it comes to bioprogramming, and that's what I think of, programming the wetware in here, right, in my head, the way to do it, and I think I'm actually ripping off Mick Goodrick here, where he was saying, there was like a finger click thing he got from Abe Laboriel, and he said it was like, oh, I can't do it, But he was like, no, this is so Mick, right? He's like, I can't do it. But if I do it and write it all out, and then I do it really slow, I'm going to, do one piece at a time, do it out of rhythm, and then slowly build it up. And then he's tearing it up, right? You know what I mean? And then, and that's the key, and I would say that I think everybody gets so frustrated when you can't do things right away. I've got a good rap here, which is that no matter where you come down on religion and the word faith, right? But there's a role. You've got to have a type of faith in music, and the type of faith you have is that the work you do today, you've got to not get a reward for it today. That's how you're going to get better if you're a musician. You work on something with the faith that today's work will benefit in a week from now, and you've got to be happy with that. I think I've heard Wayne Krantz do some raps about that. He does a great rap about this, about composing. When you go and write, and you get, you spend 45 minutes and everything's terrible and you didn't get anything done. He's like, awesome, I got that 45 minutes of no ideas out of the way. Great. Now I'm closer to getting the thing done, right? So so I think that's especially this beginning thing and acquiring anything new is, you know, slow it down and and it's delayed gratification, right? You got, it's that's the, I mean, I think we all probably, right, I think we all, it's like, that's we're all like, yeah, that's music, right? You know, you've got to wait, you know, to get it, and you got to be happy with the work you did today, right? You know, otherwise you're just gonna quit, right? You know, before you get anywhere. But it's like, you know, that's the root. You can, almost anybody can do anything if they just do it and are patient about it and do step by step by step and do it slowly. And you all tell me, Norm, slow down. Because I again, like my the inner Norm is like just wants to always do everything too fast, right? You know, it's like, you know, so but there's hopefully the, you know, what do you call it, the frontal lobe will take control of the situation. In my case.
Cheryl, what's on your mind as Norm is going through this stuff?
Well, first of all, that was really, you just said it so perfectly. The process of great technique is you have to play it, work on it really slow, and it is programming. I mean, we're a whole system, right? And so in slowing it, you're really embedding it in your central nervous system and the physicality and breathing and all of that. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you about one time we were talking and you said one of the things you like to do is, for instance, you know, especially, but I mean, I think at all levels, someone's getting into playing changes and getting into harmony. You said you like to get them to develop a pathway, one pathway, right? So, which is cool because I often think of that as a strategy. You need a strategy, right? So that you have them work on it. Start with one pathway that you cut through it, and that's going to be your main pathway. And then once you can get through that, then you can start to build other paths from there, right? So anyway, any of your thoughts about that? I really love that.
It's my Amazon. It's actually kind of you know, a sad. It's sad when I'm laughing here. I always laugh at sad stuff. So because not that I don't think it's sad, but I think my analogy, it's the Amazon rainforest analogy, right? Which is there, and I just saw there some new versions of this, but you know, there's a lot of satellite data. So basically. And I've had the, you think of like when I play in drummers bands. I think we can all, right, Cheryl, you probably can relate to this. You play in a drummers band, and you have to solo over those changes, and it's like, and it's in 1908, and the changes are, it's like what I call skeet shooting changes. I don't skeet shoot, but it's like pull, Lydian, pull, alternate, pull, you know, it's like just completely like a cascade of unrelated, really inexplicable harmony in the hardest alternating rhythms you can imagine. So it's like, okay, what I'm gonna do, I can think of it was with you know, I'm not gonna mention the drummer, and he's a very well noted. He got 4.5 stars in Blue Note on the album we did, right? But he, but the chords, still, I'm telling you, man, your chords don't make sense. Anyway, so there's one of these things, and it's like, boy, it was like when I hit the roadblock, and then Berganzi was on the session, and Berganzi's like, hey Norm, you take this one. It's like thanks, man. Anyway, it's like I was like the Mikey, you know, he likes every. So anyway, so you know, you go through and I made one one way through it. I used to do it with standards. I'd made what I would do is make, this is like you were saying, what was your way? It wasn't just one path. Sometimes I'll write out one chorus, right? You were saying, what was it? You had a strategy, right?
Getting a strategy.
So the thing is, then I used to, like, early on, and I tell my students, like when I'm playing on standards, okay, I wrote a progression of scale grids, right? You know, so it's like, okay, I don't want to be restricted by playing one thing. Make figure out and make a plan. And I'll say this, I'll say this to my students and stuff like that, is that I tell this to everybody. I don't think I see them try to do the hard stuff, like you know, the bridge to God, it was this just happened with my guitar ensemble over this spring. So the bridge to "How's Never" by Dave Holland, which again is like a little bit skeet shooting crazy. So every Dave Holland tune is a little bit like that. But it's like, okay, so everybody's kind of having a problem with the bridge. So boom, I lay out a bunch of scale. Here's a sequence. It's actually voice leading scale patterns, right? Oh, I love you, Kitty. A kitty just walked into the picture. We should have my puppy come down. She'll freak out. But it's in the difference it makes, right? Like having it like, okay, you're going to go from this scale pattern to that scale pattern. It doesn't matter. It could be anything. There's no right or wrong, but you just, like you're saying, Cheryl, you have to have a plan, right? You can't just, if it's too hard to do it right away, you've got to do some premeditation. About it and find that one path. Then, like the Amazon, once there's one road, then there's side roads. Then you make side roads. Then you connect the side roads, and then the side roads and the side roads get connected, and then it's pasture land, right? And that's what we want to do to the forest of changes is turn it into
That's interesting too. I mean, you were sort of saying this earlier about you practice slow and you're developing pathways actually in your brain, that whole connection. And every time you do something, you're strengthening that pathway, in your brain, in the wiring of your brain. And I think that's a similar thing. You find a voice-led line or something, just start there. I mean, I remember my teacher a lot of times would just write whole notes, like this is an important note and connect it to this note, and I have that, and then once you get that way through it again, it opens up from there. Like
it's like
programming that whole, the thought process, your ear, your hands, all that stuff.
And I'm down with that whole note melt. That's one of the things I think in jazz improv. It's like how insensitive is like these sixths, right? Like the whole. This is what you want to tie all your melodies to. That's kind of these weird like what would we call it? I call them like whole note melodies, like you said, right? And it's almost like every standard, it could, every standard kind of has the inside of it. There's these very, and sometimes they're multiple, because of the chord tones, depending, it's like that. I've been thinking of, it's that thing right there is just like one of these, it gets broken apart in so many different ways. It's like, right, it's but same thing with like so there can be like three kind of different half note melodies, and you kind of where you end up resolving them. Sometimes they run into kind of a dead end, right, at some point, but it's I'm so that particular thing with the tunes, and it's a really kind of upside down version of like changes improv, because it's like play the scale, play the arpeggio, and like that's what I wanted to be. You're super into not super. I mean the super chord arpeggios that we Wes's super chord, like and I know you're super into them, and I'm super into those. And that's great, and those are these giant things. But what's crazy is that it's like the complete opposite. It's like, no, there's this one, this you see to that B. That's it. Like that's the big moment in this series of changes, and that you don't hear about that from many people. I don't think. Who hipped you to that, or who was saying that?
My early teacher, John Mayone, when I was a kid, and I think. Even to this day, some of the tunes that he'd just write a voice-led line. It was either whole steps or half step, And for instance, someday my prince will come. To this day, when I play that, I see that light up in my head, and it helped me because I couldn't connect all those things, but I could connect that line and then start to build stuff off of that line. And just really, that really helped me get that concept. Like that, I do that all the time now. Nature.
Oh. And then, like you're saying, strategies, right? There are a lot of strategies. So pick one. Start with one, right? Is that what you would say, right? You know, it's like, just start with one. Don't worry about doing everything. I think a lot of, you know, it's like, and I think like when it comes to improvisation, like I think, you know, everybody thinks like, I think it was Keith Jarrett who was like, my head's open and the ideas come down from heaven into me and come out my fingers. I shouldn't say that in case it wasn't him, but somebody was saying that. It's like, but it's like if any of us, we've all analyzed people's music, and what do? They do the same thing over and over and over again. If it's Pat Metheny, you know, he ripped this lick off. That's Wes. I transcribed that first Wes playing that lick, right? You know, and it's like, but which is great. I mean, because you want to steal from the great ones, right? It's like,
well, I think that's true. Actually, I had a conversation with Jerry Bergonzi the other day, and he was talking about, you know, some of the heaviest players like Horace Silver, and going to see them a couple nights in a row, and they played the same solos pretty much. Yeah. And I've definitely worked with artists, and they do that, and it's, you know, I guess the thing is you can't play something you've never practiced.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, the more kind of things that you're practicing or working out, then they're there for you, but no one can play anything they've never practiced. So, you know, and that doesn't mean that it wasn't magical or it's not magical when they play or when you play, but yeah, you need a strategy. Yeah. You need a pathway.
I think that's an interesting point because I mean, as a classical musician, I used to firmly believe that, right? Like that I could play like myself only if I've really practiced, because as an interpreter, there's so much of a technical component to that. And it was after I came to Berklee, you know, and started working with all of you, that I had to put that to the test if I was going to learn to improvise more actively and improvise in concert. And the reality is like, I think it's true that you can play beautifully what you've practiced, but what you've practiced is also full of a lot of components of things. And so when I started to improvise, what I realized was, yes, I can improvise. I can freely improvise even. But what's coming out is still telling me my tendencies. It's still telling me what I've practiced. So like even if you break it down in intervals, it's like, you know, you play a lot of sevenths and fourths and you play a lot of these sixths like this. Well, yeah, because a lot of my hand is like coming from the first finger, right? So then if I have to like kind of now practice reaching back to play different intervals or something like that, you know, or, you know, when you improvise a scale run, Randy Roos would be like, hey, have you been practicing the diminished scales a lot? And it's like, well, I guess, yeah, because that's what came out today. You know, it's like what you put in comes out. And it might come out in a free way, and it might come out in the same way every time, or it might come out. But if you don't put it in, it can't come out. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And, and not to feel bad about it. You know what I mean? It's like, it does seem to be what all the great players, you know, it's like they're playing, it's not like they're reinventing everything all the time. They're doing you go through it as like Pat Metheny, I shouldn't say it. You know, he's playing all the things you are. So bar 8 of chorus 2, all the things you are, question and answer, and then bar 16, you know, or roughly, you know, he same lick down a fourth, same chords, same chord progression down a fourth. He plays that, and then Kenny, I think it was a Kenny Garrett album. What's his first lick? Right, that's same lick, and it's
It's
like
a good one. Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean. And his, I shouldn't do this to Pat, but he's like that. Like I said, like 40% chance for a 2-5. Like that lick, or a variation of it. But that's the other thing is that I think for improv, the thing to do is once you have a lick, you can, that's like the side roads. You can, once you have a lick, now you can start improvising with it. You turn it upside down. You go up from the middle and down from the middle. You break it into thirds if you did it in seconds. You know what I mean? It's like yeah, and I think again, this is the thing where people are thinking, it's like I get the feeling a lot of times when I tell people it's just learn this little isolated lick. Like there's a thing I do which is basically it's like it's the thing. One of the things about jazz is I think like there's a funny story I can think of what an Abby student said is like anyhow was that she had. It was like she had taught them the jazz was the quote, and it was like, and then I've thought about, well, what is the jazz, and one of the things about jazz is doing something different on that 5 chord. It's not white keys, right? And your biggest opportunity to do something other than white keys on the, if you're in C major doing a 2-5-1 is on the 5 chord, right? So that, and the first thing that is, it seems to be this universal thing if you transcribe, is doing diminished 7 arpeggio, for your 5-7 flat 9, and it ends up being no root. So you've got the 3rd, the 5th, the flat 7, or the 9. And I'm like, okay, just improvise with this. And just take, these 5 notes, those 5 notes. And then this was Liebman, actually, because I went to the Banff Center when Dave Liebman was teaching there. And he had, it did more for changes playing for me for anything. He did 2-5-1-6. And when you go to the 6th chord, it's really, it's dominant 7 flat 9. That's like the one chord in jazz improv. That's the one. If you can get that one, you got it. I think because that's the really tricky, that's the one that people have a really hard time getting their head around, right? It's that 5 of 2 minor, right? But I'm telling people just improvise with those things. There's so many, like my favorite lick that I had out of it is actually it's like back to the whole note melodies that Cheryl was talking about. It's like this that little lick. I mean, and it's like people want to play. It's like so much more, but it's like that's what I'm telling. It's like you could play just those 2 notes, and it says so much, right? And that's what makes a Jim Hall, right? It's like I think back to Abby and the crafting, with making. It's like sewing. You're sewing this change into the next change and all that stuff. And I'm seeing Ian. Does that mean we're done? No, sorry.
No, I'm digging all this. I really like what you're saying. Maybe there's one thing that maybe I want to be sticky on, is that maybe we can just call them phrases, because one thing that we talk about pathways, and like you mentioned Jim Hall, like I've been practicing in a way that Cheryl, you were saying just write out a whole chorus. I've been trying to practice this way over fiddle tunes, but which aren't so change related. So maybe fresh thing is to I'll write a whole different version of the melody that's kind of around the melody.
Yeah.
And then I'll do another one. And then I'll do another one. And each one maybe on one chord or one area. It's like maybe this is the time for a really nasty blues lick. And maybe this is the time for a really a little triplet in there. It's just moments, right? And then all of a sudden, by doing all of these different choruses or breaks, you can find your way through them. So instead of improvising and being like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like for me, that's a lot of pressure. But like, if I've done all of these things, maybe I won't play one exactly as I've practiced it. Maybe it'll be this part of this one and then that part of that one. And they're phrases, right? I mean, because when we call them licks, it's like, it almost seems like we're devaluing what we do as guitarists, right? Because it's a guitaristic thing. And that we're like finding ourselves in like, you know, what just came naturally on the guitar or something, right? But like really these are musical phrases that we've come up with, right? And like Jim Hall did a lot of that, right? Like a lot of basic bebop vocabulary sometimes is like you play the avoid tones, right? But it's not about like you, when you get there, it's okay because you're playing a phrase, because you're phrase playing, right? It's like a musical statement.
Okay, and along those lines, I was going to say this about this. This is why I tell them to limit, like we could call it phrases, but that is motivic. What am I? How can I forget this? Motivic consistency. That thing. I mean, I think that, and that's kind of what you're talking about, is having what is it? Is it motivic consistent? What's the phrase? Am I forgetting it, or is it? I'm gonna
Development.
motivic. But the idea is you take one, and this is why I tell them the limit stuff is like is again Woody Woodpecker, right? And then it's when the motive, it's like having that motive morph into the next harmony, but the motivic consistency. Did I say that? That I didn't say that. That's the word, motivic consistency, like that. And that's one of the things when I think of the phrases, you want that phrase to repeat. And it's the same. And one of the things that's crazy, Ian, is that I analyzed Arkansas Traveler. I just analyzed it, and you know what? Chord tone on downbeat, non-chord tone on offbeat, just like bebop scales. It's the same thing. It's except that and what goes on like in bluegrass is that it's also those are Coltrane tetrachords. That's our right. How many times have you heard that lick, right? That's 1, 2, 3, 5 on each chord, and it's like, and there's the, it's and again, motivic consistency, right? In both in those cases. But I think that's another thing about, especially about like you can play a lot less and sound impressive if one idea relates to the next. You know what I mean? As opposed to, it's like, okay, whatever, it's like, then it's in order to be interesting, you've got to play like, crazy fast or something, it's like, but it's like, actually you can get a lot of people's attention if, your ideas linked together, right?
Or even just like, I don't know about you, but like in trying to play like that, where everything is completely through composed and everything is totally spontaneous, like I develop a lot more tension. And so like when I'm playing and I'm trying to play relaxed, and usually if it's like on a flat top in a scenario with other people, like it's a very physical thing, and just the slightest amount of tension, I'm like dead. So like to have these phrases ahead of time that you can move through and just be like, I'm going to make a choice to go to this phrase, and then after that I know what phrase I'm going to play, so that way it's not like, holy crap, what am I going to play? I have to play something totally brilliant and new every time, right?
But that's part of the discipline of all of this that hopefully it leads you to, like Norm was saying earlier, where the guitar becomes one big position. The fact is that you can spontaneously compose an entire piece and not know where you're going, and build it as you walk it, and have it through composed, and learn to breathe and have a beautiful tone and sound just like yourself. Of course you can. It's all in you. Of course, that's where it comes from. And all of the problem that like Ian laid out, that's true for all of us, is non-musical. It's not a musical problem. But you get there by doing all this work, by laying all this groundwork that you all have beautifully laid out, in the same way that you learn a strategy to learn your scales, and then you can then you see the matrix of the fingerboard, right? And so you've all kind of encompassed a lifetime of learning and the whole process and how it feels in maybe like 35 minutes. So that was really beautiful. Really beautiful.
I was thinking of the thing you were saying about, like, you know, when you practice, and then, because I think we're all, it's like, this is totally like all of our experience. Like, you practice is like, all right, let's practice at diminished scale, and then you go to play and you play diminished scale. There's a quote that from John Abercrombie. He told me, he was like, when he was going to school, there was this piano player. I think we've all heard a variation of this. There's a piano player in town. I forgot who it was. He was like, man, I love it. You know, I love how this guy plays. You know, he says. So he goes to the guy. He's like, man, what? I love how you play. Like, what's your concept? And he's like, I just play myself in and out of mistakes, right? and it's a funny thing. It's one of the things that busts us out of this. You know, in improvisation, is the mistake, right? It's like the Chinese word for crisis is the same word as opportunity, right? So you get this. One of the things is, like, when you make that mistake, this is an opportunity to do something you've never done before and justify. Now we're going to justify that mistake, you know.
Right, because you're justifying it by what you play next, not by what you played before it, right? Yeah,
it's one of the things I think about outplaying. What makes outplaying cool? I think, you know, it's like when you're in the middle of it, you don't know. It's the person on the tightrope. You don't know if the lick is it good or is it bad. Oh, it's good, right? It's like there's a moment in the middle of outplaying where it's exciting. You don't know if the guy's gonna fall, if the person's gonna fall off the wire, right? It's like, whoa, or are they gonna catch the rung if it's a trapeze person in the air? That's why outplaying, I think, is exciting, because we don't know. Nobody knows if it's gonna come out good or not, and then they don't do it. I think of so much. I think we could all think of this when we watch the Olympics and it's the quadruple lutz. I think we all feel that, especially with, like, classical guitar. It's like, oh, and here she goes. Oh, it's like they fall on the ice. It's like there's so much of music, but that's also where the excitement. You know, there's a lot of excitement in that those moments. It's like those are the things. You know, it's you know, and along those lines also messing with. You know, you've got to give people what they expect and surprise them, right? That's what great composition is. You know, you give it, you know, you say, you know where it's going, and then they, you know, you hit you with a surprise. Anyway.
You know, this kind of, I think you've already answered it in some ways, but Ian, you always ask a question that's really an advice question in some ways for students who are listening, and I wonder if you want to pose that.
Yeah, so there's a thing we ask everybody who joins us, which is what's something a student should be asking about or thinking about that they might not even think to ask about, that might not be on their radar?
You know what? I think, you know, what's funny, I've run into this. Master intervals. If you want to, you know what's one of these things, and okay, and you know, so this, I'm not saying this is for everybody, you know what I mean, but and the thing about intervals, like I see this a lot, you know, with people who maybe don't have, you know, people are playing a lot, they could play great, but they haven't thought about music theory. It's really being good at being. I find a lot of people are not that good at picking out intervals from any given point on the fretboard. So like a big thing, you know, big thing is make sure, and then also not only thinking about the up way of the intervals, but thinking the backwards, and they're trippy, right? You know, because and they invert if they're not perfect intervals. So if what I say is, you know, if I think of mi re do, that's the happiest interval in the world, right? But actually, if I invert it, it's what I call the note of ultimate sadness, which is flat 6. So if I'm in the key of E, da 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 da. I was playing the theme from Love Story for somebody, but it's like, if you watch World at War from the 70s, this is the big note, da da. That's the same interval, and that's what messes people up also with intervals, is that you can't, it's the same distance. But it's like if who's on top, who's on the bottom, and it has completely different emotional impact. And the intervals are the yardstick by which we measure music. That's the thing. It's like if you don't have you don't have that interval. If you don't have that, then you can't figure out what you're doing. Basically, you can't say I went this far, right? And say and then you got the other thing about, like, oh god, it's like the whole problem with a guitar is the G and B string. It's the G and B string. It's given me a lifetime of heartache and frustration. It's like that's the essence of the problem of the guitar. It's because of that G and B string. We have one of the most complex layouts of any instrument. You know what I mean? Out of sax, you got an arpeggio. You hit this octave key. You do anything on piano. I know doing different keys on those instruments is hard, but once you have that lick, all you do is you press either a button or you just do the same thing up and down the keyboard, right? On our thing, this note, like I was talking about, the 1, 2, 3, 5. How many different ways are there to play this? What, 10, 12? I don't know. You know what I mean? The same thing looks completely different all over the instrument, and it's like, and it goes back to what Kim's saying about that uber key, right? Getting that uber key down. That's the problem with guitar. So you got it. Then when we get into this intervals thing, you have to be able to see as the stick is in the water. If you stick a stick in the water, it looks bent, right? That's what the G and B string is. It's this bend in the, it's literally, you have to know that, yes, the notes are bent across that part. John Figg calls it the warp refraction zone, right? And it's like, but you have to see that you have to know in your head that bent stick is straight, right? And again, the intervals get into this concept that I was thinking of absolute music, right? That's what that's what you want to start thinking is. And again, what I would also say to students is number everything. Everything. You have a chord, and you have a bunch of notes. You got to know every number. Is that the root, third, fifth, seventh, flat 9, sharp 9? Every bit of that, everything. If you do that, if I don't, that's how you're going to learn how to steal that, right? And make that your own, and then do what you're talking about, change the phrases, mess with the phrases, right? And then I think we all feel like, there's this lick, it's like, oh, this is my lick. And then I was like, wait, no, I ripped that off. Right? It's like, and then you go and see the original lick, and then you realize it's like, whoa, it's not the same anymore. Yay, it is my lick, right? Anyway.
Yeah, I think this is such a great point. And Cheryl and I and Ian with us, we've been kind of swimming in intervals and scale degree numbers and things as we've gone through the curriculum in the last few months, like kind of revising things and really looking at it. And it is true, Norm, that like everything is built of intervals. Triads are stacks of intervals. 4-part chords are stacks of intervals. And you're right, like every melody, you put a scale degree to your melody or your melodic phrases and you write new ones. Even if you just alter the rhythm, that's going to make it sound like a different melody.
Yep.
And so if you really know that, I think that's what people say when they say know what you're playing, and a lot of students say like, oh, I don't know what that means. I think this is what people mean, is what you said, is like understand like how that these melodies that you love are built of intervals, and those intervals are part of chords. And when you're playing over changes, you're taking that material and using it in a different way. And when Ian is rewriting melodies and rethinking these beautiful old traditional tunes, that's what you're doing. You're using the stuff that built those things. And then if you want to go out of that, it's going to sound, if you want to borrow, but you could bring new things in. But I think that's really important to remind people what it means to know what you're playing.
And put a like one of the things is when I'm saying the numbers, and I think when we're all talking about this, all of us, I think if anybody's listening to this, when we say a flat 6, we mean that you hear it, right? It's like it's like, and that's where I say is the note of ultimate sadness. It sounds, Abby and I like put happy sad faces on the mode. Like the modes are a series of like, happy faces. Actually, Lydian is a little bit sad because it's got the sharp 4. It's poignant, right? But it's like, put a face on these things, put an emotional thing. So for me, 6 is not 6 is it's a happy note, by the way, and it's a sad boo da boo da, boo da boo da boo da boo da boo. It's a sing song note, right? So I'm not just thinking of it. It's like 6, yes. It sounds, and then people are probably like, "Oh, it's math. I hate math, and I don't want to listen anymore." But the thing is, try to take the math out of it. The math is just a description. It's also everything in music theory is just a description for stuff that sounds good. So you know what I mean? So it's just a label for something that sounds good. It's so don't be afraid of it. And then you can it's like, oh, when you hear Buddha, that's like, okay, great, that's 6, 6 to 1, right? And that's a very common vocal thing, right? And by the way, all blues players, I don't hear enough 6 at Berklee, okay? If you 6 is like a really important blues note, right? It's like we're all, because the guitar is tuned to E minor pentatonic, right? Sorry. It's tuned to E minor pentatonic. We all want to be like minor pentatonic all the time because it also sits well, right? But if you were singing, you'd probably end up singing a 6 instead of a flat 7, and it's and then you look at Green, right? He's like, it's like, it's all of the, anyway, so much 6 in the context of blues, right?
Beautiful. Cheryl, as we're kind of wrapping up our pot of coffee for today, what's on your mind here coming in?
Wow. You shared so much wisdom with us. I really love, back to the stuff we were talking about, just working on things really slowly, and then you develop them, and yeah, the things we were talking about, the pathways and all of that. So I think there's a lot everybody's going to get out of what you're sharing with us. So thanks for all that awesome information.
Well, thank you for sharing all your wisdom. And it like, I'll tell everybody who's listening, I mean, it's this like a heavenly job to work with. With all of you, and again, it's like, I think it's just, what's so great is like this, department and the school, we all learn so much from each other, right? It's just and I just want to say how lucky I feel to be a part of it. It's just every day. I tell my students every time. I'm the luckiest person in the world to be doing this, right? It's no joke. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Working with all of you, and definitely with you, Norm, and yeah, it's an amazing department. Ian, what about you? What are you thinking about as we're kind of wrapping up?
I really liked your answer to that question. I mean, it's just like, man, how about play more six? Like, it's such a useful and quick thing to be like, yeah. I mean, just check out some intervals. Yeah, I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah. What I really loved about this, and I mean, what I loved about a lot of it, I loved that there's these ideas of here's a strategy, and then here's all these possibilities. You know, like let's bring it back to one simple thing, and then think about if you really got to know that one thing, and you got really comfortable, and you went really slow. Look at all of the places it can go, and that's just such a cool thing to think about. You know, as we're here in our summer and everybody's getting amped up again for the new academic year, which is kind of our new year, you know. And I think it's a great thing. So Norm, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, can I just pass one thing about the intervals on? I don't want to.
Please, I could talk about dyads all day.
One thing I forgot to mention about it that when I was thinking about the answer, you have to deal with. There's one of these things nobody talks about really when we're talking about intervals. We're going between base 12 and base 7. And you've got to get comfortable with that. That when we talk about intervals, we talk about half steps, and then we tell this, and we never think about when I'm talking about the students, and then we're like, oh, no, and that's 1, 2, 3, you know, and then we're not saying, and then we're saying, yeah, but measure the half steps, and there's an inconsistency in music. It's like I've thought about if I'm going to explain this to AI. The AI is going to understand music in a base 12 system. So meaning it's going to think of everything in half steps. And when we tell students, when we're introducing them to intervals, we're kind of bouncing back between saying it's a 7 structure and then also saying it's a 12 structure, and we don't and the students feel confused, and I think that there's a big confusion in there. So you got to get comfortable going between those two different ways of counting the 12 notes, right? That's just one thing I forgot to mention about the intervals. Sorry, I don't.
Intervals is a whole world, and I'm glad that you. I love them. I was once famously quoted as saying, "You never graduate from intervals."
No.
So that's great. Well, Norm, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ian, for another coffee talk. Thank you, Cheryl. And cheers, everybody. Coffee cheers. Tea cheers. And we'll be here with you next time on the next Coffee Talk.